Hello, everyone. This is Lori Litticoat, and I'm the director of the trade show at the NCBA trade show. And before we get started with the webinar, I want to do a little housekeeping and mention a few approaching deadlines. First, I want to let you know that the exhibitor kit is available on our convention website at convention.beefusa.org. That kit provides you with the important show-related information, deadlines. You can order show services, get your order forms, and you can also access the Freeman Service Manual. And by now you should have received an email with login instructions to update your exhibitor listing for the Beef Resource Guide. It's from me, but it has a no reply at ExpoCAD address. So you might check your spam folder, but you'll need this information to log into ExpoCAD Web and make your edits to your exhibitor listing. And that deadline is November 9th. Also, a good number of you have already registered for your hotel rooms and registered your booth staff. If you haven't done that yet, that deadline is January 4th. Otherwise, you'll be paying to register even your complimentary allotted badges. So you need to make sure to get in and do that. And lastly, save yourself some money and place all of your orders with Freeman before January 4th. That's their advanced order deadline, and you'll get their deepest discount. So on now to our webinar, how to make your NCBA trade show exhibit stand out from the crowd. We've been working with Jefferson Davis now for a few years. He's done a great job helping us help you as exhibitors with exhibitor education. And in doing so, our commitment to you was to help create an ROI center. And that ROI center is on our website. You can go and view live and replayable webinars, how to exhibit articles, and you can always access Jefferson by using the Ask the Trade Show Expert. You can view our exhibitor newsletters. So all of that is set up so that you as an exhibitor are more successful. When you're successful at our show, we're successful. Jefferson is an author, consultant, trainer, and speaker of all things regarding the trade show. He's been in the exhibit industry for over 30 years, and he's exhibited at well over 200 trade shows. His E3 evaluation team has evaluated over 24,000 exhibits in action. He's been helping clients like you generate over 800 million in exhibiting results. I'm happy to introduce Jefferson Davis.
All right, thank you, Lori, and again, thank you to everybody who joined us for today's webinar, how to make your exhibit stand out from the crowd. As Lori mentioned, I think one of the unique things that qualifies us to present a webinar like this today is that for the last 7 years now, we've been doing a program called Exhibiting Effectiveness Evaluation, including at NCBA, and me and my team have physically stood in front of, now we're pushing almost 25,000 exhibits in action, and we've scored them on 21 factors. So we've seen it all. We've seen, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've seen what works. We've seen what doesn't work. And we're still learning too, by the way. Every show we do, we walk off the show floor with even new insights and ideas. And it's awesome to be in a position to be able to share this content with you today. So thanks for logging in. Let's jump in. We got a lot to cover in a short period here. Okay. The first thing you got to think about as you design an exhibit is you have to put yourself in the mind of the attendee. And by the way, at the last 2 exhibitor summits now, if you haven't attended, we have had producers set on panel discussions, and we've had them talk about how they use trade shows to build relationships and make buying decisions. And, you know, when you see the world through their eyes, then you know, you can design an experience that works for them. And the big idea is, you know, the NCBA show is growing. It's getting bigger and bigger, and there's so many places where the attendee could place their time and attention. They're really in a state of overchoice, especially when they hit the exhibit hall. And they're more and more selective than maybe ever before. They're not just stumbling up and down every aisle and just falling into booths at random, but they're really selective. And so here's a great opening question, a way to think about your exhibit. Is your exhibit a worthy destination? I love that phrase, a worthy destination. Meaning, is it worthy of the attendees' time? Out of the 400 or 500 other exhibiting companies, is there something going on there that's going to make them want to stop, enter, engage, and spend time with your booth? That's the challenge that faces every exhibitor, and not just in the NCBA trade show, but honestly, every trade show. So we've got to think about our exhibit as how do we make it worthy of the attendees' time. So as you start peeling the onion here and you start thinking about, okay, how do we do this? It helps, first of all, to really touch the primary reasons why people attend trade shows. And it really comes down to 3 big reasons. Number 1 is they're coming to learn. And of course, they're learning in educational sessions, maybe CE credits, but equally important in the exhibit hall. They're learning in the hall. And they should be learning something when they visit your booth. The second one is shopping, sourcing, purchasing, and revalidating existing buying relationships. So they have learning needs, they have shopping, sourcing needs, then they have networking and interacting with their colleagues and key opinion leaders and subject matter experts and suppliers. And so these are the big 3 reasons why people attend trade shows. So if you were to stand off from your exhibit as you execute it now, you would want to ask yourself, how well does our current exhibit experience serve these needs? And what specifically are we doing? What are they learning in our booth? How are we making it easy to understand and source our products? And are we building in both time and space for peer-to-peer, colleague-to-colleague type discussions and networking in our booth? Because if you do these 3 things, then you'll be touching the primary need of almost every attendee that comes to the expo. Exhibit Surveys has done research to try to figure out what is most important to booth visitors. And the number 1 thing is the overall booth, the appearance when they walk by the booth. Does it grab their attention? Does it quickly communicate what they do? Is there clear messaging? Is there quality information? Are they going to visually see something and walk out of there knowing something that is useful to them in managing their ranches? And number 3 is the relevance of your content, your exhibit experience to their business. So appearance, quality of information, and relevance are the 3 things that research tell us are most important to booth visitors. So if we're going to make our exhibit stand out from the crowd, right, then there's 5 things that should be happening, that what I call the must-dos to become that worthy destination. Number 1 is that it's got to get noticed. You might think that they see and they process every exhibit on the floor. They don't, right? If you put yourself in the mind of the attendee, they're out on that show floor, everything's screaming for their attention, and the human brain, in order to stay sane, generalizes, distorts, and deletes a lot of the information that's coming at us visually, auditorily. And so job 1 is make sure they see it, because if they don't see it, they're not going to stop. Number 2, quickly and visually, it's got to communicate what you do, and there's got to be a clear and obvious reason for an attendee to stop, enter, and engage. Number 3, the exhibit itself has to be approachable. That includes both the exhibit property and your booth staff, right? But it's also got to be easy to enter. It's got to be easy for them to find what they're looking for. For those of you that have multiple products, multiple solutions in your booth, it's got to be quickly evident what is where in your booth. It's got to be easy to move around, and it's got to be easy to exit. Number 4, there's got to be some form of meaningful and engaging and brief, right? You can't get too long and deep, but something to do in the booth, something to do that's going to be meaningful, going to be engaging, and they're going to walk out of there knowing something they didn't know when they walked in. And when they leave your booth, they walk away with something useful, knowledge-wise, and something valuable. You know, everybody's looking at their challenges, the problems, the weather, the bugs, right? You know, how do you raise more healthier cattle, right? How do you keep the weight up? So they're looking for takeaways from your booth, and sometimes that means whether they buy anything or not from you, right? So each one of you listening today, you are the subject matter experts in what you do. So I think if I were to look at these 24,000 plus evaluations we've done, and I would ask what are the most obvious things that are missing, number one is the value proposition in terms of why should I pay attention to this booth out of 300, 400, 500 others. And number two is the real hands-on. The number one way that attendees want to engage with exhibits on show floors, and this is from Center for Exhibition Industry Research, the number one way is through an interactive presentation or demonstration. So we're going to talk about all this stuff, take you on a visual journey as to how to do this, give you some examples, and hopefully you're going to walk out of this webinar today with at least 3 specific and immediate improvements you're going to make to your exhibit going forward. So let's get started. Now, some of you, like me, when I exhibit, some of you provide services, right? And just being straight up here, it requires a little more thought, a little more creativity. It's one thing when you have a physical product, it's a lot easier to stage, it's a lot easier to present and demonstrate, but when you have a service, it takes a little more thought, a little more creativity. So I would recommend that you think less about the service that you provide and more about the problems you solve, the opportunities you create, the savings, the efficiencies, and the improvements. Because those will be your hooks. That's what you can use to grab attention, and that's what you can use to build your interactive experience around. Maybe it's just the problems, you know, the top 5 financing problems facing producers today and how to solve them at our booth. Different strategies, one-to-one or one-to-many presentations are good. Gamification is super hot. I'm going to talk more about that as we go on. Take the 60-second financing, money management, safety challenge, right, through an interactive tablet or a touch screen. Using physical props to hook and engage. Like when I exhibit, one of my targets is show organizers. So I use a tape measure with a calculator. My theme might be success is measured by the companies you keep. How do you measure up? So my prop then would be a calculator, which is also a tape measure, which I can not only use to hook, but I can put it in their hands and have them calculate 2 numbers. And now it's very immersive, very interactive. Case studies are always valued. Everybody wants to know, you know, okay, so this ranch was having this problem. The different approaches they took over time were A, B, and C. The one that finally worked was C, and the impact that it had on the operation. White papers, good. Industry intelligence reports, good. Visual client testimonials, which could be presented both in static graphics and or on AV. So a lot of different ways for services, but the bottom line is you're going to have to think a little more creatively, and you're going to have to figure out, how do I bring my service story to life? And it's absolutely possible, but it just takes a little work. All right, so let's talk about getting seen here. How do you make sure on that first worthy destination pillar, get noticed, how do you make sure your exhibit's going to be seen? Well, there's 6 ways to do it: lighting, imagery, clear informative messaging, creative use of audio visual, something to do in the booth, interactivity engagement, and a proactive booth staff. So any one or combination of these factors can virtually guarantee that 80 to 90% of the people that pass your booth see it and process it. So let's talk lighting here. Here's a phrase: people are like bugs, they're attracted to light. Fastest way to get a booth noticed is to light it up. So whether you're a small exhibitor using a backlit pop-up like this, or whether you're using creative edge lighting on silhouettes or props within your booth, or whether you're using color blocking and very strong down and up lighting to draw your eyes to different places in the booth, or whether you're just getting your logo and some good imagery backlit, like the Merck example here, or to whether you're doing a more sophisticated 3D type booth using lighting to really draw your eye, or to whether you're featuring a solution in the booth and you want to draw people's eyes to it, so you're using moving lighting like this example over here on the bottom. See those 6 things? They look like they were suspended in the air, but they were drawing your eyes toward the new product display. So here's the first question for all of you on today's webinar. How are you currently using lighting in your booth, and what could you do to intensify your lighting? The fastest way to make a booth be seen is light it up. So hopefully this will get you thinking in the area of lighting. Second, imagery. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So maybe with imagery, using a silhouette approach like this, with backlit with silhouettes. Or maybe you're just going to have a crystal clear image like this, the Red Bull, you know, the heat detector showing the blazing hot bull breaking through the backdrop, which is perfectly relevant for this audience. Or maybe it's using large, almost like cartoons with text bubbles. There's a lot of storytelling that can happen quick visually with using cartoons and text bubbles. Or maybe it's just having a large graphic panel and really changing up the color. I mean, I've never really seen a pink desert with a tree in the middle of it, have you? That's an unusual image, and yet the color and the imagery really draws your eyes. Or maybe it's getting a little edgy and a little outside of the norm, like this picture of this company does insurance, and they know that a lot of their target customers are afraid. You know, insurance is so complex and it's fearful, and so they're playing the fear theme here. Not only did they use a weird image of the hockey mask, right, insurance, which is a what do you call it, unfamiliar image, but notice to the left, the familiar image, are you protected? There's a certificate of insurance on the left. So they kind of hit a double whammy on this booth right here with the unusual image and the familiar image. And number 3, sometimes your imagery is not only going to be communicated through your backdrop, but maybe it's going to be through a large prop in the booth, like this example from NCBA. It's a real attention grabber. So here's your next checkpoint. How are you currently using imagery in your booth to grab attention and tell your story? And how could you do it a little bit better? And one word of caution on imagery. One of the big mistakes we see is when booths put too many images in the booth. They'll have a small booth, a backdrop with 15 or 20 images. That's too much. You know, you got to think like a billboard on a freeway. The attendees flying down the aisles at 70 miles an hour. What imagery is going to grab their attention and force them to look at and process your booth? Now, here's another little secret that we've learned actually years ago in advertising and also at the cosmetics counter with lighting, but people are people watchers. So if you have an image of your booth of a piece of equipment and you get maybe 3 out of 10 to look at it, if you put a person in that image, it'll jump up to 6 to 7 out of 10. People are people watchers. Notice the example over here on the left, right? Got the, you know, this great well-placed imagery of a customer. Here's a creative example of a company who sells instruments and wants to draw your eyes to the display. So what do they put right at eye level? The face of a person there. It's a tricky technique, but it radically increases the number of people that look at it. And another example of having relevant imagery in the booth. So my third question for you as you analyze your current exhibit is, okay, you're using imagery. How well are you integrating people into your imagery? If you will, it'll get you a lot more looks. Next, clear, informative messaging, right? The questions in their mind are going to come down to, what do you do and why should I care? And so you've got to try to call this out quickly, visually, and concisely. So here's some examples. 4 words. Look at this. Reviews matter. get some, right? I get their whole message right there, podium. Appointment gaps, great hook. Talk about knowing the pain point of your audience, right, and calling it out in a question format. But also notice the color that they used on the header, red. Red is a very intense color. It usually significant. Beware, problem, pain. Hey, if you got appointment gaps, you're going to notice this booth. Here's a great one here. Capture the impossible, right? Motion focus is what this company does. Once again, in 5 words, right? 2 words, appointment gap. Reviews matter, get some, 4 words. Here's another example, and what was cool about this booth was that headline up on the top where it says Imagery with no compromise was being projected, so the copy changed. They were now below, you'll see the presentation right below it. That didn't change, but that headline, Imaging with no compromise for every patient, changed every couple minutes. And that's a really powerful way to call out different benefits, use motion as a hook, right? Here's a real clean example of a small booth with the value prop perfectly well placed. Populate your EHR with ZyDoc. Notice the who, what, and the why are crystal clear, right? Work efficiently, the imagery, everything's good in these booths. I get what these people do. You know, one of the big problems we see at E3 is we stand in front of booths and we're trying to figure out what does this company do? And the problem is you got to be Captain Obvious at trade shows. Do not make attendees work very hard. They won't. They'll just pass right by your booth. Okay, and here was a great example off the NCBA floor of really telling the story, you know, about the genetics. A 7% higher pregnancy rate, $20 advantage in this, $51 more per cow per year, and $30 and relevant imagery, the 2 eyes, which are really in an interesting place, pulling your eyes right to their messaging. So here's your next assignment. I want you to stand off from your booth with the eyes of a stranger, and I want you to look at your booth and ask yourself, does it quickly communicate what we do, and is there a value proposition, or is there a why they should care, okay? So you're trying to answer the what we do and why you should care. Quickly, visually, right? Both with imagery and copy, and not too much copy. All right, next, audio-visual, AV, okay? Now, whether it is a smartphone or a tablet or a flat panel or an interactive touchscreen or augmented reality, virtual reality, projection mapping, there's some super cool stuff you can do with AV in the booth. So I'll show you just a few examples here. Here's an example of using projection on these lenses, pointing you to an interactive AV demo. And this imagery moved, so it drew your attention. Here's a simple example of a small inline exhibitor who's using fast facts and a well-placed flat panel to quickly educate the market. 80% of drivers do not do this. 1 out of 7 do this, really building the case for their products. This was one of my favorites. It was a motion wall. It was GE, and it was called 30 years of MR innovation. And they had the innovation of each 30 years on these cards that kind of came towards you as you moved right or left. Motion with a flat panel right on the perimeter. Here's an example of using a well-placed LED panel dangling the questions that should be in the mind of your customer. How can I increase my case acceptance? So this is a great strategy too. And a lot of you, we've seen at the show, you'll have flat panels in your booth and you're running silent movies on them, meaning there's something going on, but there's no volume, which you have to watch anyway. There's no header, what's showing, and there's no captions. So if you are going to use flat panels in your booth, make sure that you use captions. And when you're not using it to present a product or service to a person, have it go to a screensaver similar to the Henry Schein example here, right here, where you're dangling the questions and using them as hooks. Okay, here's an example of an interactive AV from the show floor in the Merck booth, and it was cool because they used the silhouette of a cattle to draw your attention, and they placed their interactive AV right in the middle of it. So my next question for you is, are you using AV in your booth now? And if so, how? And how could you take it to the next level? There's a lot of benefits from bringing AV into the booth. A couple more creative examples. This one is probably one of my all-time favorites, given that I evaluated this booth, and every single person that passed this booth was captivated by these eyes because they slowly closed and blinked. And see those spots in the middle there? Like in the pupil, you see the spots? That's corneal dystrophy. When the eyes closed and they opened, the spots were gone. And this was just a small booth, a 10 by 20, using rear projection to project these two eye images. And this booth, 100% of attendees that pass look at it. This is a trend that we're seeing now that is working really well. It's got some cost to it, but boy, if you can get it figured out, connecting flat panels. This one has 5 flat panels connected that are using a combination of company branding, imagery, messaging, and video, and they were featuring different products in the booth, so the entire panel would change in color, in product, and in video. So it's another creative way. And here's an example we saw of a small booth that has embedded a bunch of iPads into the booth, and right now they're in different images, and there's one point where they all coalesce and come together and make one large image. So there's some really cool ways to use AV in the booth. And it's really the where things are headed. I see a day in the near future where within the next 3 to 5 years where most of our small exhibits are no longer going to be static printed backdrops, but are going to be, as the price comes down, are going to be snapped together LED walls that you can rent or buy. Okay, so interactivity and engagement. At the summit this year, we had a couple exhibitors come up and take us inside of their thinking and their game plan, and Zoetis knocked it out of the park with their experience in the booth here. They had multiple experiences in the booth where attendees would come in and interact with technology to learn something. Here's an example, one of my favorites from a firefighter show. I want to talk about full engagement, where they had the Dare to Compare challenge, where each one of these little rooms closed off and had smoke come in, and you could wear your current mask in, because they had all the main masks on the market. You could snap it on, walk into the room, come out, and then you could put on their mask, the G1, and walk in and experience the difference. Super powerful presentation. And maybe it's gamification like this. Here's an example of a company who does IT, whose big message was direct to the point. So they created an oversized Plinko game here. On the left side mesh, each hop is a stop, and FlexNet goes direct to the point. So the attendees would pick a chip number, and the lady up front would hold their chip on one side, hers on the other, and drop them. And hers would go straight down, and yours would get bounce and get stuck. Each hop is a stop. It's a great job of bringing some scale and interactivity and fun, but also great storytelling, not just putting a game in the booth for the heck of it, but telling a story with the game. So here's the next question for you as you audit your exhibit is, what is there for attendees to do? What is the experience in your booth, and how do you ratchet up the interactivity and the engagement in your booth? If you will, you'll have a booth full of interested, qualified visitors. All right, this might be a good point as we're working through this content here quickly. Any questions that have flashed into your mind that you may want answers to, go ahead and go to your question queue right now. You'll see a tab. Type your question, press send, and I'm going to keep an eye on the question queue while you think about what questions you might need to ask. I'm going to keep moving on. And remember this, there's no such thing as a dumb question, right? Except maybe the one you need to ask, but you don't ask. So you got questions, go to your queue, type right now. All right, let's talk about another important function of a booth, and this is both small and medium and large booths: ease of access and ease of navigation. Avoid barriers to entry or exit. Those of you with larger booths with multiple solutions, make sure that it's easily to discern what is where in the booth. Those of you who have multiple solutions and have the ability to kind of place them in a logical order, so maybe the process is A, B, C, and you organize your solutions in the proper flow or implementation scheme. And zones in the booth are super hot too for medium and larger booths. Floor planning and creating dedicated zones in your booth, having the meet and greet area on the perimeter, having an area in the booth where, you know, if it's not a qualified visitor, but you would like them to learn more about your solutions, that you can direct them or take them to an information seeker area. Your interactive presentation area, your conversation areas are the places when you want to have deeper conversations, whether it's a meeting room or more comfortable seating. And relax and recharge areas are super hot now too. Attendees are walking around, they're on their feet all day. If you have a place where they can get off their feet for a few moments, charge up their device, have some water, smoothie, tea, whatever, that can draw more traffic too. So here's 3 things not to do with a booth, okay? Number 1 on the left is don't fence in your attendees. People do not like to go into enclosed spaces and feel like they're going to get caught in there, hard to get out of. On the right, the barrier on the right is not only the large circular counter, but equally important, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 booth staffers all standing there with their back to the aisles. And that's supposed to be a reception desk, by the way. And the center picture for a small booth, everything that could be wrong with a booth is pretty much wrong with this booth. Table across the front, 2 chairs behind it, nobody in the booth, trick or treat bowl on the side there. That's not how you do it. So make it easy to enter, make it easy to navigate, make it easy to exit. For those of you with multiple solutions, I want to give you show you how others have featured them in the booth. On the left here, this company does instruments, and we've done a lot of instrument type booths, and the biggest problem we see is they just throw them all down on the table and hope you figure out what is where. If you'll notice these header signs on this circular booth, scissors, needle holders, forceps, hooks. Great job of organizing by application and putting header signage. On the right, this is a great example of using color blocking, different color solutions, and getting your solution centers right above eye level and right below your company brand. SLT, retina, vitreolysis, and ultrasound. So these are examples of how to kind of make sure that attendees can quickly find what they're looking for. They're not going to spend a lot of time searching. If they can't find it, they're going to be in and out of your booth. Let's talk about interactive experiences, a little deeper dive here on different ways we can really take advantage of the number 1 way attendees want to engage. So one-to-one presentations. This is one of my all-time favorites, the Customize Your Cold Vault experience. So Coca-Cola is targeting C-store operators, and the experience in the booth was unlocking profits. So you'll notice that they had a recreation of a cold vault on the wall, and then they had a touch screen, and as you picked your demographic and the type of beverage, it would show you where to place it in the cooler, how much to place, and the impact that it typically has on sales. Now companies in almost every industry we're looking at are starting to knock off this idea because it's really cool. Once you get it figured out, you can use it for multiple shows in multiple years. You'll probably get bored of it faster than the attendees will. Hands-on demonstrations, you'll notice on the left, they've got these crates that are real lightweight. So it was as simple as putting it on the floor and having the attendee with their feet, showing them how light and easy it is to flip it over. In the center, this one's a little over the top, but we're seeing more of this with virtual reality. So these guys went as far as not only to have virtual reality, but have comfortable seating with foot massagers. You can do some pretty amazing stuff with technology, comfortable seating, and foot massagers. By the way, every time I went by this demo, all 6 seats were full. Here's a very simple example from Rubbermaid of a great value proposition. Cleans the water so you can clean the floors, and what's right below the header? Check it out. Give it a run. Dip it in there. Watch how it works. Hands-on demos, right? And it might be something as small as this, just comfortable seating near a flat panel where you can sit with a visitor and take them into some form of experience about your product or service. Okay, so how are you demonstrating your products now? Are you using AV? Are you making it extremely interactive? You know, I was at a show last week doing an E3, strangely enough, in New Orleans, where we're going to be. And while I was evaluating the booth, the lady said, you know, I have this flat panel in my booth, and I think what I want to do is put my website on there, so when the attendees come in the booth, they can go to my website. And my thought was, people come to trade shows to do more than they can do on your website. If the website is the primary experience in the booth, it's not very compelling, okay? And why would they spend their time at show looking at your site when they could do that afterwards? So we got to get more thoughtful on our demonstrations, okay? One-to-many presentations, remember, they come to trade shows to learn. So here's an example of a small theater in a medium-sized booth, and look at the crowd in the audience. If you title it right, if you present it properly, and you promote it aggressively, you can have a booth full of visitors. Some of you in small booths are saying, come on, Jefferson, I'm in a 10 by 10, a 10 by 20. I can't do that. Yes, you can. Here's an example of a company doing a small theater in a 10 by 20 booth, right? Real clear value prop, flat panel, little presentation area, nine stools. So you can. And the impact of a well-designed live presentation can have attendees lined up around the block, as you see with the Colgate example here from a dental show we did. So one-to-many presentations, keep them short. You know, they're 7 minutes top end. Promote them aggressively, have a high-energy presenter, and have great content that the attendee is going to walk out of there knowing something they did not know when they walked in. That'll be useful to them and their ranch. Next strategy, recreating environments. So Valspar has this roofing compound that apparently keeps the attic space cooler than traditional roofing. So rather than just tell you this, they created scale models with their product and the 2 other leading roofing approaches with a heat lamp and a digital thermometer. Great presentation. Okay, here's an example of a calf pull from the NCBA event, which is extremely relevant for this audience. Something to do in the booth, very hands-on, very relevant to their real world. Here's an example from Mohawk showing really differentiating the quality and the longevity of their furnishings and stuff by creating a side-by-side vignette. Here's what the Mohawk looks like after a certain amount of time, and here's what the competitors looks like. And that's a really strong strategy. Here's another example of Kimberly Clark at InterClean trying to educate business owners about where germs get transmitted in the workplace. So they created this little vignette of all the common areas like the desk, the computer screen, the mouse, the water cooler, the bathroom. And they were just showing you quickly as kind of here's where germs get transferred in the workplace. Gamification quizzes, we mentioned this a moment ago. Kimberly Clark from that same booth had the germ personality. They had this quick interactive where you would plug in and it would end up giving you one of these personalities. And then you could go around the booth and learn about, you know, based on your germ personality, what you're likely to be interacting with. Sherwin-Williams, branding, right? You know, they're at a show really trying to brand, and how do we grab attention and create fun interactivity? They had the color match challenge. How fast can you clear the board? These cards flipped over and matched, and you see having a leaderboard on the top. In 49 seconds, Ken V matched them all, and having daily prizes come back at the end of the day to see who's on the leaderboard and win. Here's a great example of the snack swap challenge where the theme was elevate and discover category growth. So they would have 9 products that appeared on the screen. The retailer's job was to tap the 3 that they thought were bringing down the category and then pick 3 that they thought that replaced it. And small booths, again, you guys may be looking at this and saying, Jefferson, well, we don't got a big booth. We can't do that. Well, here's a 10 by 10 doing test your safety knowledge using what we call a challenge bar right on the center of their booth. They had 6 iPads that interacted with this screen that had questions. They got the visitor to engage with, your ideas, your story, your product, learning, and they had a winner there, whoever could get the most questions right. So gamifications, quizzes, are you bringing AV into the booth, and are you getting some way for them to interact, that they're having fun, it's experiential, and they're learning something that's going to help them better understand your company, product, services, gamification. Self-guided demonstration areas. Sometimes self-guided is as simple as having well-placed feature benefit messages right on the product, like this example. Sometimes it's going to the far right on this with projection mapping, and this is a lung at the American Thoracic Society, and in a semicircle with interactive touch screens to learn about the different therapies and how they interact with the lungs. Sometimes you got a lot of stuff to show. You don't want to bring it all to the show, right? Here's a information area where you can learn about any one of the company's solutions just by tapping, and they don't have to bring everything and try to feature everything. And maybe it's as simple as having these interactive literature stands where people can quickly grab digitally the information they want. So how are you, do you have self-guided, and how are attendees gaining access to your information, your PDFs, your literature? These are all great examples. Next, we're running toward the buzzer here, so I've just got a few more slides. Improving attendee comfort and dwell time. The fastest way to increase dwell time in your booth is to have carpet, which you have to have at NCBA, but the secret is thick padding. If you've been on a trade show floor and walked into a booth that had that 2-inch padding and your feet just went, right? That's a really strong way to increase dwell time. Space. Don't put too much stuff in your booth. Don't have too many staff in your booth. Accessibility, we talked about that. Not only is your booth easy to enter and exit, but if you have products, they can physically get their hands on them and touch, push, feel. Number 4, seating. I've seen some large booths that'll have 3 levels of seating, from a hard bench to a medium chair to a really soft chair. And the longer they wanted your dwell time to be by each solution center, the more comfortable the seating. Okay. Your staff behaviors can play a huge role in making attendees comfortable and getting them to stay longer. And we know food and beverage, if someone enters your space and you give them coffee, tea, smoothie, they're going to hang around longer, and also food. So these are all ways to kind of increase that comfort for the attendees and more dwell time. Every minute your customers are with you, they cannot be with who? A competitor. Okay. Here are some examples. Improving the attendee comfort factor with, this one was a hydration station that had different water flavored, cucumber, lemon, strawberry. Here's a simple example of just having a couple sofas and a charging station. And here's a pretty creative sample on attendee comfort factor in terms of branded presentation chairs that were balls. Notice this guy's got a full house too in this, okay? So some of the things that will impact your recall and your memorability. Number 1 is the interest in the product. Number 2 is that your company name is visible and memorable. Something to do in the booth. Number 3, if you want recall, get them to do something in your booth. Live presentations are powerful, and your booth staff. And we were talking earlier about your booth staff as being one of your attractors, having a booth staff who looks and acts like they want to be there. They're standing up, they're smiling, they're engaging, and then the exhibit design color. Here's some examples of what you don't want to do in a booth. Notice the top left, you got a 10 by 10 booth here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 green shirts and nothing to do in that booth. That's an intimidating booth to go up to. What, and notice, look, they're all in there, but I don't see anybody talking to anybody, do you? Look on the right, top image. They've confused their brand space with their office space. This gentleman is working on his computer, doesn't look like he has any interest in talking to attendees, and the lady is texting, sending the same message. Both of these booths will get passed by. And then the bottom image, this one is really off the rails. I was doing an E3 and I heard somebody snore, and I turned around and the guy is dead asleep in his booth here. Not to mention everything else that could be wrong with the booth is probably going on with that booth. All right, we've just scratched the surface, but we're out of time. There is a really killer report available on the Exhibitor Success and ROI Center called the Standout Exhibit Report. This is where we walk the show floor end to end, and we pick booths who are doing a great job of execution. We took photographs and did a short write-up as to what made this booth rock. So it's a great way for you to get lessons from within the NCBA show. All right, with that, I'm going to open the question queue. While I take a look at the queue, I'm going to toss it back to Lori for any additions or closing comments.
Thanks, Jefferson. Again, everybody, I just really want to stress going to our website and reviewing the ROI Center and reviewing some of these articles that are up there for you. And you can always access Jefferson through that Ask a Trade Show Expert. And don't forget some of our deadlines and those forms that are in the exhibitor kit. Those are important, and we've tried to spell that out there for you as much as we can. So, but if you have any other questions and that kind of stuff, you can always reach us, email, text, call, whichever works for y'all.
All right,
how we doing,
Lori?
Jefferson?
Good. We've got a few questions in the queue, and I'll start taking them. If any of them are show-specific, I'll give them to you verbally. The first one is, will the presentation be available after the webinar? Yes, we are recording it, and we will be uploading it to the Exhibitor Success and ROI Center, which is on the screen right now. Second, what do you recommend for giveaways for small booths? Okay. This is a deep topic. I could probably do a whole webinar on it, but I'll give you the high points on giveaways. Number one, the last thing the average person needs is another cheap branded pen. I do live seminars, and I've told people, ask how many of you have a promotional product on your person right now you picked up at a show, like a pen or whatever. Usually a half of the room will raise their hand. When I ask them, someone quickly tell me without looking at it whose name is on the pen, nobody has been able to tell me. So here's my thought on giveaways. Make it unique, number one. Make it useful, number two. Hey, if it's something that a producer can carry on their keychain, on their belt, on their toolkit, probably even more useful. Make it unique, make it useful, make it quality. Don't give away junk, right? And if you have the ability to personalize it by engraving their name or initials, that'll raise it up. And also, I would distribute my giveaways with selectivity. I wouldn't just put them out on a table for hit and run behavior, but I would use my giveaways as a reward for engaging instead of as a reason for stopping. That leads me to my next question is, someone asked, how beneficial is it to have giveaways like drop your card in a bowl, to win something? Well, here's the thing. If somebody drops a business card in your fishbowl because they want to win something, my question is, do they really have an interest in your products? So contests can work, but here's what I would do to improve that process. Like if I'm going to have a fishbowl, here, win a GoPro or an iPad or whatever, an iPhone, right? I would put a registration card, a qualifying card near the bowl that says, please answer these 5 questions to qualify. All questions must be answered to be entered in the contest. That way you'll at least kind of get rid of the people who only want a GoPro. Because if they're not interested in your products or solutions at all, do you really want that business card? I don't know. Let's see. The last question I'm seeing is, if you manufacture a product, is it good to have the products during production for visual aids? Yeah. Anytime you can show it, tell it, display it, attendees want to see it, they want to touch it, they want to interact with it. So physically, as much as possible, having your products on display. Remember, they want to do more in the booth than they can do at your website. So that is all I'm seeing for questions. And, you know, the questions don't have to end. As Lori mentioned, if you'll go to the Exhibitor Success and ROI Center, you got questions, we're here for answers. You can send us an email within the site. Me or one of my team members will respond fast. And hopefully you have gotten at least 3 specific ideas from today's webinar that you're going to apply to make your booth one step better. Because sometimes, if we've learned anything in our 24,000 evaluations, sometimes all that it really takes is 1 or 2 little tweaks. Like, I've got another question that just came in before we wrap, and the question was, how many booth staffers should we have in our booth? Don't overstaff, don't understaff. The staffing rule of thumb is 50 square feet per exhibitor. So if you have a 10 by 10 booth, you have space for 2 staffers, maybe 3 if you don't have a lot of furnishings and equipment in the booth. But don't overstaff and don't understaff your booth. 50 square feet per staffer is the rule of thumb. As the booth gets bigger, that moves to 50 open square feet of space. Okay, so that is all I'm seeing for questions. So on behalf of Lori, Kristen, and the management team at NCBA, we want to thank you for being an exhibitor. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to log in. And hopefully you've grabbed at least 3 specific ideas you're going to apply to take your booth to the next level. We will be at the NCBA Expo this year again doing our E3. I can't wait to see the changes everybody makes. So thanks for logging in, everybody. Have a great day. We will see you again very soon, and especially at the Expo. Make sure to use all of the content on the ESRC. Lori, any closing comments from NCBA?
Nope. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and thank you, Jefferson. We really appreciate our partnership with you. And everybody, let's go to New Orleans.
Let's do this. The Big Easy, here we come. Thanks for logging in, everybody.